Hey guys, it's Nina Hart, president of the NNBA, and I'm super excited because Casey is not available to do live stream today with me. Casey's normally here. She's our member coordinator for the NNBA. So I have with me today the other dynamic duo, my partner in life and business and crime. This is Jetty, my husband.
Hello.
And we thought we would do this live together today since Casey wasn't able to be on. And we would talk about overcoming the fear of failure. And, I talked about this at the NNBA when I did my first, I think it was my first ever speaking gig, or the NNBA and NADANA, the National Director of Nurses Administration conference. I did both of those, my first speaking events in 2022, and I spoke about this topic at both of them. And I did a little different version for entrepreneurs versus directors, but we had kind of been through a lot up to that point, and so thought we would just come on and talk about that a little bit. In 2020, if you don't know my story, you now get to hear, this is like the full circle story because I only tell my part of it, right? Like if you're married and you're a wife, you tell your part. And then like when your husband's in the room, the story evolves and changes maybe a little bit, or maybe that's just me.
Maybe a little more truth comes out.
Yeah, right. Maybe a little less biased version of the story you're about to get. So we moved to Hawaii for my dream job as a hospice CEO. It was very apparent to both of us that we were supposed to do that. I think we didn't have no disagreement or discussion that job was like what we were going to do. We were going to move to Hawaii for me to take this job. So we did that. We got there in November of 2020. And I hated the job. I hated that job immediately. It was so miserable. It was awful. It was like this weird, uncomfortable 1 hour drive each way. I was gone from 6:30 to 6:30 every day.
Yeah.
Every day. And then on call, for the rest of the time. So my dream job ended up being a nightmare, but I didn't say anything. I don't think I said anything to you about hating it.
Maybe a little bit.
Just like,
yeah, probably so.
Really?
I think you did.
I don't remember. I remember not sharing that I hated it.
Yeah.
So maybe
You're not afraid to share that you hate
I'm not afraid to share that I hate things, but I don't think I really opened up to the full extent of how miserable I was immediately at that job.
Right.
But
it was only a couple weeks.
Yeah, I'd been there for like 3 weeks. I hated it by the time the orientation was done.
Yeah.
Before orientation was done, I hated the dream job. Shocking, right? You know that? Have you seen that meme of Snoop Dogg and he's like in the car, like with this nasty face, or maybe he's crying and he's like me sitting outside of the job that I begged God for? That was me. That was me literally sitting outside evaluating my life choices after like the first 3 weeks. And so 5 weeks in, they fired me. And I remember telling Jetty, I think they're going to fire me. And I remember you saying, they're going to put you on the board. This is a promotion. And me saying like, I know what promotion feels like, and this isn't it. Like I knew it was bad. And they didn't give me a reason. They just let me go. And I had heard of this kind of stuff happening. I've been in leadership in corporate for a long time. I've heard of people getting walked out. I've had people that I worked with get walked out by corporate and things like that. And I knew that something bad was about to happen. And so I went in, had the meeting. I was like completely just floored. They couldn't even give me a real reason they were firing me. They just said, you're not going to remain in this position. We're letting you go. And I remember just like saying, wow, over and over and over again. All I could say the whole meeting, wow. And she said, you keep saying wow. You're saying wow a lot. And I'm like, I'm very shocked. Yes, that's all I have to say. I'm very shocked. I feel like you have no grounds to be doing this to me at all. Like I was pissed. Like I was not happy. I've never been fired a little backstory, like my whole entire career has been like moving up and more responsibility and high performing, like one of those people who like does really well at their job. So I never ever had a job where I didn't do well. And like that recognition is really important to me. Now I have to get it from him.
Yeah, she likes gold stars.
I need a gold star to say like, look what I've done here. I need that gold star for myself. Seriously, I have to have that. Like, it's very important to me. And so I don't know if anybody else on here like gets their satisfaction from their job. Hey, Lakeisha. But that's me. So I needed that like validation from my job to like tell me that I was doing well and that I was successful. And that's literally how I defined success, was through my job. And so when my job no longer gave me success and would not give me that gold star and like literally took that star back from me and gave me like a red X, like, meh,
you're fired.
Yeah, that was really super painful. And I remember praying on the way home. Like, this is probably one of the clearest memories I have, is praying on the way home and being just in tears, like sobbing, being like, what are we going to do? We've only been here for a month. We signed this 12-month lease for this outrageous amount for my cushy new CEO job, right? And I remember praying and asking God, like, what do I do now? And he said, listen to Jed. And it was the worst possible answer I could ever, like the why, God, anything but that. And it was very clear, like, my answer was to listen to Jed. And so I went home and listened to Jed, and Jed said, we didn't come here for this job. This is not why we're here. We're not going to leave. Because I felt like, okay, we got to go. We got to like do some recovery here. And like, I had this whole strategy. Okay, if we do this, and we could get a loan just to get tickets back, and we could stay at the farm. And I had this whole plan, like this panic mode. And he was like, nah, we're going to stay. We're going to stay in this house with $5,000 a month rent, with no job, no income, and no plan. And that is just not how I roll, folks. I don't know about you, but that is not in my nature.
Yeah.
So I think I started looking for jobs like that day. Like, I think I started looking for jobs.
You were looking before.
But as soon as I knew I was going to get fired. As soon as I knew I was going to get fired, I started looking for jobs. And so I had applied for this regional quality specialist job at a local hospice in Hawaii. And the day I got fired, it was that night, he called and said, hey, you applied for this regional hospice quality specialist job. And I gave it to a friend of mine. She's remote and she's going to do it remotely. And I said, well, thank you so much for calling. I really appreciate knowing, because usually you apply for a job and you don't hear anything, like it's just crickets, and it's like this nerve-wracking. And I had been looking for jobs that paid like less than half of what I was currently making, just to have something, just total panic. And so he said, I'm just curious why you're applying for jobs. It says that you started this executive position at this hospice like a month ago. I'm just wondering why you're applying for jobs now. Well, I know I'm not getting the job that I applied for with him. I have no reason to lie at this point. Like, I'm not there. I have nothing to gain. I'm not getting a job with him. So I said, well, actually, they fired me and I don't know why. And I'm, just kind of freaking out, and I'm looking for another job. And I just got here. They moved me here. They relocated my whole family, and then, fired me 5 weeks later. And I'm just trying to find something else. And I said, they didn't give me a reason. They just let me go. And he said, yeah, me too. I started that hospice, grew it to what it is today, and then they let me go for no reason at all. So I started my own hospice, and I see that you did some accreditation and survey readiness at your last hospice. And I said, yeah, I did a lot. I've done a lot of that, actually. I've done it in long-term care and hospice. I've done survey. I've done a lot of stuff like that. And he said, well, I'm wanting to get accredited with ACHC. Maybe you could help me with that. And I don't want you to come in, this was in the middle of COVID, 2021, early 2021. This is like right when COVID like went wild. And so he's like, just stay at home, remotely audit my charts however many hours a week you want. I'll match whatever they were paying you hourly at this place. I know I have a good idea what it was, since I was in that job before I got let go and started my own hospice. And I'll pay you, I'll match that, and you just audit my charts from home and help me get ready for accreditation. Does that sound like something that would interest you? And just to roll back the clock, I have been wanting to start my own business. I've been wanting to work for myself at that point. That was 5 years ago. At that point, for 10 years, I had all kinds of ideas. So I wanted to start a CNA school when we were in Indiana.
Yeah.
We went and toured little office locations, and I was too afraid at that point to pull the trigger. I was afraid that no students would sign up and pay. I was afraid that, what else was I afraid of? We would be homeless. I've been the one who makes more money just because I've been a DON and been in these corporate positions, and so my check was what paid the bills, and so I was afraid that if I let go of that guaranteed money, I was so afraid that we would just fail and fall apart, and you would leave me and I would be taking care of our children alone. I didn't think he would leave me, but I was afraid that everything would fall apart and it would be total chaos.
Yes. Or worse, I would look down on you.
Yeah. Or you would disapprove of me and take my gold star away for being such a good wife and making so much money.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was really scary. And I don't remember how much I actually talked to you about why I didn't do anything, or did we actually have any real conversation about, no, not a whole lot of conversation happening there. So all this time I've been trying to get these business ideas together, different ideas, a CNA school.
I might have poked some holes in those ideas too.
Oh, you think? What kind of holes did you poke in?
How are you going to do this? How are you going to pay for this?
Yeah.
How are you going to do that?
That's not going to work.
What about this? Did you think about this?
No, I don't even know what that means. So there were just too many questions, and like, how is this going to work? And I don't know how to do this. And I don't have a, big line of credit, and I don't know how I'm going to pay this lease if no one signs up. And there were just so many questions that I couldn't get over, that I would just stop as soon as I got to a question I couldn't answer. I just quit immediately and let it go. So before we moved to Hawaii in 2020, in about 2018, 19, when we lived on Lanai prior to moving to Oahu, I had started blogging, started doing this a healing heart blog, and I would walk to work every morning and think of like things that I wanted to write about. And so I started writing this little blog, mostly about just my past and living on Lanai, and just how much I loved it there. And that kind of got me looking into like the world of like digital content and like how to monetize that. And I realized like I probably couldn't monetize a blog. Like I was just kind of doing it for my own because I like to write. So I had started creating like some DON course content on a platform. Don't think I ever told you about this at any point. Don't think I ever I don't know if I told anybody about this. I just thought, I'm going to pour every piece of knowledge I have into this course on how to be a DON, which is like impossible, right? And even if I could do that, who could like digest that content? Who could like sit down and do a course on everything I know about how to be a director of nursing?
I think he did that while I was asleep at night.
I did it while he was asleep at night. I would sit up and like cry about like how to build a WordPress website and how to do a webinar, how to do an email list. And just the frustration of all of that was just too much for me. And so, at this point in time, oh no, Tracy, no, it doesn't have to be that hard. It doesn't, I promise. It can be easy. Just keep working through it. It doesn't have to be hard. But so finally, when all this went down, back to 2021, I started consulting as a survey readiness accreditation consultant, independent contractor for this guy in his hospice. So got fired. He hired me on as a consultant. So I got fired in January. By February, I had a contract with him, and we had, I think, 6 weeks with no income, which sounds really terrifying. And I'm not really sure how that worked. But whatever the case, I was making so much money from him. I think I was working like 24 hours a week, just auditing his charts from my house in my leggings on, going to the beach when the kids got home from school.
It helped that he didn't take any taxes out.
Right. Yeah. When you work for yourself, you take out your own taxes. So I will say I don't recommend necessarily the way I did some things at first, right? Like seriously, I just want to say this. When you are like overcoming like serious personal difficulties and barriers, like you just got to go with it, right? Like you got to give yourself some grace. I did not do things right, right? Like me starting my business, I didn't even know there was a luxury tax for a solid year. In Hawaii, there is a GE tax, general excise luxury tax on businesses that I didn't know existed and did not pay for over a year, for 18 months. We had 18 months of back taxes from Hawaii, from luxury taxes that I had no idea. So overcoming failure means you're not going to get it right the first time. I just want to say that. You're not going to get it right. It's not going to be perfect. So just let that idea go. So then I started like exploring like business coaching and mentoring and like growing this business that I finally had my own business. I'm finally working for myself. I dove into the NNBA. I signed up for the NNBA conference. It was virtual that year because of COVID. I joined Jason Duprat's breakout session on course creation, and all these things started happening, started coming together. I started looking at putting my courses together again. And I had a coach tell me, like, why don't you take all this stuff that you made that you already have and just like throw it in a folder and sell it? Because I was like, I have this course I started, I worked on forever. I never told anyone about it. It's not finished. It's so much. I'm trying to do everything. I'm trying to make it perfect. I'm trying to put everything I've ever known in one course, right? Which doesn't even make sense. And she's like, why don't you just take some of the forms you made as a DON and some of the survey tools you made and just throw them in a folder and see if it helps other DONs? And I'm like, yeah, I like that idea. So Memorial Day weekend, 2021, I took 20 forms that I had made as a DON, just audit forms and education tools, PowerPoints that I made myself for nurses and for survey readiness. And I put them in a folder for $27. And I put it out on a DON Facebook group and said, hey, these are tools that I made as a DON, put 10 years of my life into, and they're in here for $27, and I hope they help somebody out. And when I woke up on Memorial Day, that after the weekend was over, I had sold over 100 of them. I think I had made like $3,000 and in a weekend. And I think that at that point I was like, let's go. This has something to it. This has some substance, right?
Exciting and terrifying at the same time because PayPal said you were a fraud.
PayPal, I got so many. You're right. I got so many sales in such a short amount of time on a PayPal account that had never sold anything before that PayPal locked my account, said it was fraud, and wouldn't give me any of my money. But I did get that money because I pulled it out immediately and was like, oh no, transferred all the money out. So I did get my $3,000, but that's why I hate PayPal. So that's why I don't use PayPal if I don't have to. But so that kind of started me on like the digital content creation and like all the ideas and possibilities of what I could do. And then what's funny is that this is like the perfect definition of me and why I overthink everything and can't do anything. I probably talked to 25 CEOs of long-term care facilities about this staffing program I was building, pitching this staffing program, building it out, spending all this time on what it would look like while I am being paid as a hospice accreditation consultant. All these no's from long-term care CEOs that don't want to pay for staffing. While I'm being paid as a hospice accreditation consultant, I am trying to find clients in something completely different that no one wants to pay for.
Yep.
Why? Why are you doing that? Don't do that. I'm being paid for something. There's a need there. Hey, someone needs hospice accreditation. No, I'm going to try and sell staffing to long-term care who doesn't want to pay for anything. So don't do that to yourself. Now that seems very stupid. I feel very stupid that I spent that whole entire year pitching to CEOs, doing presentations. It was a good learning experience. I value that time. I don't think it was a waste. I learned a lot. I gained a lot of connections, great connections. I put myself out there. So that was like a really good thing. That was the first time I've ever like tried to sell anything like that. So it was a great learning experience to be pitching this to companies and talking to CEOs and, you know, building rapport. But it's a simple lesson that like you're trying to do something that's not working. And it's like, hey, why don't you pivot to what is working, to what someone is actually paying you for, right? Like it's a definite need that someone's willing to pay for.
Yeah. The idea was already there.
The idea was there and I was doing it. And I'm trying to come up with a new idea and be paid for something that no one wants when I'm doing something that's already working.
It's a need, but no one wants to pay for it.
And we've talked about that in lives that Casey and I have done about like market research and like doing these you know, kind of assessments to determine like, is there somebody willing to pay for this? Because if not, you're going to struggle. Like it's going to be a struggle. But yeah, so that was 5 years ago. He's still my client today, by the way. My first client is still my client. Love that man to death. Just absolutely my favorite person in the world. I was super fortunate, I think 3 years ago, as I was just building connections and making connections to build a relationship with Fire Note Hospice EMR. I absolutely love their team. They're so special to me, but they have been amazing partners. And that really helped me like lean in to the compliance side of things and like understand how to help hospices with their documentation and with EMRs and, you know, those like technical components. And so I really started to get into the tech a little bit, which was like cool for me because I really enjoy that, really enjoy working with them and like understanding how what we document works a certain way and how we can improve. And I love their software and I just love their team. So that's been an amazing thing. But all these things came out of that failure of me losing my job. Yeah. All these amazing things that have happened, none of them could have happened without me being fired. And so, you know, I think a big part for me is realizing like I would not have let go of that job on my own. I would not have quit because I thought I was stuck there in that job. We had moved all that way. I had, you know, all these kids needing me.
Yeah, obligations.
And you could not have pried that paycheck out of my cold dead hands. Just so you know. There was no situation where I would have been like, this is the perfect time to start my own business during COVID, lockdown, moving to a new state across the Pacific Ocean, you know, with all the stakes higher than they have ever been in my life to just lose everything. I mean, there's no situation where I would have done that at that time.
I think the severance and non-compete thing really just cemented it in there that we had to.
I forgot that.
Stick it out.
I forgot to mention that. So in that being fired, this really awesome company who cares so much about people and their families gave me $0 of severance. So what they offered me was a 2-year non-compete. So 2 years of not working with any hospice in the country for one.
Hawaii.
Was it Hawaii?
It was Hawaii. Yeah.
It was within their area of doing business.
Yes, so but California.
They had Montana, California. That's right. So it was like maybe the western half of the country. It was a really stiff non-compete for someone who's worked for your company for 5 weeks, right? Like that was like the most absurd, insulting thing I think I've ever seen in my life. Yeah. So 1 month of severance pay for 2 years of not working for any other hospice. And that's my specialty area. It's what I love, right? So I knew, like, I was just looking at that and I'm like, I cannot do this. Well, the man, my client who offered me the consulting position was so amazing that he connected me with his attorney that he used at the time. And that attorney, you know, tried to push back, tried to get a better agreement, and they would not give me any more than 1 month of severance. He's tried to give me 6 months of severance pay, I think. And so and I would have taken that, right? Would have taken that hands down and walked away and taken my 2 years of non-compete and just kept moving. Yeah. But they literally put us in a position where we couldn't take anything. So I had to walk away with nothing but my last paycheck. And so, and I wanted to sue them for that really bad. I really did. And he said, you'd have to have a team of attorneys. He said, you're the 9th person they've done this to. 9th person they've moved across the ocean and fired. And now I know the 10th person they've done this to. Small world. And so he said, you'd have to have a team of attorneys and you would start at 6 figures to try and sue them for this. He said their legal team and how he said, I've dealt with 8 other people that have been in your position who have wanted to move forward, and you'd have to have a dedicated legal team to do it. And so we'd let it go. But if I can defame them on any opportunity, no, I'm just kidding. But they'll get what comes to them, just like other companies do. Okay, I'm getting kicked under the table. I'm letting go. I'm letting go of that bitterness towards them. Actually, seriously though, for 5 years later, like it's really hard to let go of that. That was like a super hurtful, traumatic experience. And I joke about it now because it's like so much good has come from it. But like when we go through stuff like that, like I know people have been through a lot harder things than being fired. But for me, that was probably one of the hardest things I've ever been through. Like to have to come home and I remember like having to come home and have the conversation with my kids that I lost my job and how like just like embarrassing and shameful and like scary that was to like tell them, and they're worried like are we gonna have to leave and move? We just got here. What are we gonna do? And like everything was unknown. There was no right answer. Yeah. Like
people commit suicide over that.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. And I didn't ever consider that, but I had you, and you were responded to that very well, very supportive. I was very fortunate to have a super supportive team of people around me, like working me through this experience and like, just telling me God had something more for me and that he was going to use this situation for amazing things. And so, for me, I knew there was more, but you're right. People who don't have any hope in their life, and that job defined them, and that's what they had, probably would have been in a lot different situation. So ultimately, using that failure as leverage, that failure opened up the opportunity for me to start consulting for myself full time. And through that, I remember doing that AFT, that aromatherapy freedom technique. I was literally like working through this with like counseling, okay, like different ways of counseling, but self-help and like development, personal development, like how can I move through this? And I was doing this AFT, and I remember like going back to like memories. And AFT is like a process that works you through like memories and like helps you set a goal and solve a problem. It's a whole process. It's similar to EFT, emotional freedom, if you've ever heard of that. But I remember like having the realization that like I was already successful. I remember like looking up and thinking like, this isn't a failure. I'm already successful. I've already succeeded. This is okay. This is what it's supposed to be. I'm not supposed to have the answer. I've never had the answer. And that really helped me like come to the conclusion that failure brought that success to me. Like that failure was my success. That failure built my success. It opened the door to that success. Yeah. It really like had to happen that way for me. And so that was like a big revelation to me at that time. Like that was a huge positive. Like that's really when I started working on like my mindset and how I see things and how I think about things that happen to me, like how I view experiences. And I think for overcoming failure, like you have to understand that how you view what happens to you, your perception of your experiences is what creates your reality. And I've read multiple books that said that. I've read multiple quotes that talked about that, and multiple like psychology psychologists talking about like our inner thoughts create our outer reality. How we view and perceive things is what makes them real. But we were talking about this in the car yesterday. I asked him to be on this live stream yesterday when I realized Casey wasn't going to be able to get on. And we started talking about beliefs. We started talking about beliefs and how what we believe is true. Like what we believe is true.
Yeah.
Because we believe it.
Whether it's real, whether it's real or not.
Yeah, whether it's real or not.
Yeah.
We believe it to be real, and we're so convinced that it's true that nothing could change that. So if I believed I could not make enough money without having a paycheck, that was the bottom belief of me not making the CNA school and me not starting consulting and me not doing any of the things I did. The root foundational belief of that was that I wouldn't make enough money to let go of my paycheck, that my paycheck would always be more than what I could make at my own business. And I know you probably don't want me to say numbers, so I'm just going to say like a bunch more is possible than my 6-figure DON salary. Like we have blown that out of the water.
Yeah.
Like I will say that a week in February, we made more than I've made in most months of my life. Any month?
Yeah.
In February, I made more in a week than I have ever made in a month, I think, before that. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's very possible that your beliefs are holding you back, is what I'm trying to say. If you believe that you're making the most you can make at your job, and that's holding you back from something else. Like, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with having a paycheck or like making what you're making. Great. That's wonderful. But I'm saying if you believe that's the best you can do, that belief is keeping you playing small for sure. Because I remember even like saying the words to you at one time, I will never make more than $50 an hour.
Yeah.
I remember being a DON and not making $50 an hour.
Yeah.
My first DON job, I made $27 an hour as my first DON job, right?
You rounded up to 28.
28. I rounded it up, 28. Well, I remember like having the conversation with Jetty, like, man, I'll never be able to make $50 an hour. And then I made $50 an hour. Yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh, I am making my DON job in Hawaii was my first six figure job. And I remember saying, I don't think I'll ever be able to make more than $50 an hour.
Yeah.
And like,
so there was no other DON jobs in Franklin County.
And then, you know, I had these beliefs that I created as reality, that like I put up these fences to like protect myself, I guess, against what I thought was possible or what was safe. This is not safe. It can't be safe to make more than $50 an hour. So I can't do that because that's not safe. I have to keep my $50 an hour paycheck because that is safe and protected. And you know I can do that, and that's within my realm of my comfort zone. But I love this Henry Ford quote we were talking about in the car. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. If you think you can do it, you're right. If you think you can't do it, you're right. Whatever we believe is literally our reality. What we're going to do. We decide it. We believed it. We decided it. We made it real. We made it happen. And that's it. That's what it is. That's the end. And I think people don't realize, one of the things that I've talked about a lot is that failure actually costs you money. The fear of failure costs you money. So not being willing to fail costs you money. So if you're holding back because you don't want to spend $100 to do something, maybe that's costing you $10,000. You know, like there are so many stories I've heard about, you know, business owners who invested in something or didn't invest in something.
Yeah.
And, you know, because they were afraid. They were afraid they would lose that money. So they didn't do it. And it ended up costing them like hundreds of thousands of dollars. The 3 feet from gold thing that I was showing you. So when I did my speech at the NNBA in 2022 on overcoming the fear of failure, I played a YouTube video. It's called 3 Feet from Gold. And it's about this guy, you know, how many 100 years ago or 200 years ago? I don't know. It was a long time ago. But it was about this guy. And 600 years ago?
I don't know. 30 years seems like 3 years to me now.
Right.
So.
30 years ago. We were married 21 years ago. So time is irrelevant. But there was a guy, he bought a gold mine. Got to get back on track. Sorry. Rabbit trail. There was a guy and he bought a gold mine and he dug and he dug and he mined and he mined and he mined. He had a whole team of guys. He spent every cent he had. He found nothing. Zero. Waste of money. He sold this mine to this other guy for pennies on the dollar, right? He was like, there's nothing in it, but you can have it. The other guy had an expert come in, and the expert evaluated the mine and said, there's a vein of gold in here close. Just keep digging. I think I'm messing this up. I don't think this is right, or I'm missing parts of this. So watch the video. It's like 8 minutes long. 3 feet from gold on YouTube. So he pays the expert. He keeps digging. They dug for 3 more feet than the first guy. They hit the vein of gold and it was worth like millions and millions and millions. It was like a huge, like the biggest vein of gold ever found in this mine. And he ended up like buying a bunch of businesses and running like huge businesses based off what he, found in this mine. But basically he almost gave up. The first guy gave up, the second guy almost gave up, and somebody else would have found that. Somebody else who bought the mine and dug for 3 more feet would have found the gold, right? So it's like, really, we just have to keep pushing in, even though it seems hard and it seems like there's nothing happening. Like, that's been so much of my business and so much of what has kept us successful is like just leaning in. And I remember a point in time, was it on Lanai or in Oahu? I don't know, where that was like my word. The word I got was like, lean in, lean in, lean in. And that's all, every time I would think about like, this is so hard. This can't be right. I can't be doing the right things. I'm not doing enough. It's not going well. I'm not getting anywhere. Nothing's happening. I just kept like getting the words like lean in. And I would pray about it and it'd be like, lean in. And I didn't even really know what that meant. Like, that didn't even really mean anything. Like, lean into what? Nothing's working. It doesn't work. And so, I mean, we just kept pushing forward. And now, I mean, I don't think I ever thought my business would be where it is right now. I never thought what I'm doing right now was even like a possibility.
Yeah.
So now I own 2 businesses. So I'm running the NNBA as the president and Heart Healthcare Solutions, my hospice consulting company. I have more clients than I've ever had right now. I just spent a large chunk of money, just invested a lot of money into a specialization program that paid for itself in a month. I spent 5 figures to specialize my business in January, and it paid for itself in January or in February, by the end of February. So I'm finally seeing the things that I always wanted and always thought were possible, but I had no reason really to know that because I had never done it. Finally, those things are happening.
Yeah.
And I get to work with this guy full time now. We're together. Yeah. All this time I had been, keeping things, keeping things, maybe even like dreams and like plans and not disclosing details or trying not to, I don't know what I was doing. I guess I was just trying to protect myself from failing. Like, I was afraid it would fail. So I didn't want you to think that it would. I don't know.
And I think when you had to go back and do the DON thing for a short amount of time, you kind of felt like you were failing a little bit.
Huge failure. When we moved back to Tennessee, that's very expensive. It's like a $25,000 move. Yeah. And so, my business at the time had slowed way down, and I was like, man, I don't know what's going to happen. Do I not work for myself anymore? I don't know what to do. And so I took a job to move back, and they paid for our relocation. And I stayed there for 6 or 7 months as a DON, got him through survey and did the best I could, and, hated every minute of it. It was great. It was really good to be back in a building and be back. It also cemented, I am not an employee and I cannot ever work for anyone ever. I am unemployable.
Yeah.
100% unemployable for eternity. There is no plan B now. And so that was really good for me.
But sometimes you have to be able to go back to go forward.
Yeah, I agree. And my business actually really grew during that time.
Yeah.
I got new clients during that time. I kept the business going during that time. And I did the Goldman Sachs. I did the Goldman Sachs 10K small business program. I got accepted into that and got to fly out to New York to graduate from that program and learn the legit MBA business stuff that I always wanted to learn, that I always felt like my business was missing. Turns out I already knew all that all along and had already been doing a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I believed in my head, I had created this belief that I didn't have enough business knowledge to do it.
Yeah.
So now I have the business knowledge that I always wanted to have. And that was a really good experience. And I feel like, I learned a lot from that. And I also grew a lot from that. And I feel like that everything that has happened, everything, every failure, every embarrassment, every misstep has brought us to the most success we've ever had in our lives.
Yeah.
This very moment.
Yeah.
It's freaking awesome. It's badass. Am I allowed to say that live?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
Okay. And it's exciting. And we both have this very exciting togetherness feeling we've really never had before, because we've always been doing our own separate thing and had our own separate things that we wanted to do, and they finally kind of came together in this adventure that we're on. And not to say everything's perfect. I still feel very stressed out about everything. It's very stressful, and we don't actually know what he does yet. What do you do here?
What do
you do at Heart Healthcare Solutions?
That's a good question.
You wanted to be asked that.
I guess we need to look at our key results area.
Yes, we need to make some.
Yes.
We need to make some key results areas. It's what he means by that. But we're still definitely there. I don't ever want to act like we have this together.
Yeah.
We're just showing up.
Yeah.
We're just showing up and leaning in.
Yeah. I think the important thing to bring up too is we are failing the entire way forward.
The whole entire time. Isn't that a Max?
Failing forward?
Yeah. That's a John Maxwell book.
Yeah.
Failing forward.
Is it?
Yeah, we have it. It's on the bookshelf.
Yeah.
We do. I've read part of it.
So it might look like success to people. You see the success, but people don't always share the failures because they're kind of embarrassing.
Super embarrassing.
Owing thousands and thousands of dollars in taxes and back taxes.
Yeah.
And
super embarrassing.
Having to go back to a DON job and work for someone else.
Absolutely miserable.
And being bossed when you don't want to be bossed.
Not possible.
And so those kind of things, it's part of it.
It is. It really is. Yeah. The failures are moving you forward even when you don't feel like they are. If you even when you are in the middle of a failure, you're like, I am going backwards, right? I've lost so much ground.
Mm-hmm.
But then working through that failure and leveraging that failure and deciding to see the opportunity in it and deciding to still keep working even when you're failing is actually exponentially moving you forward, light speed. You took 2 steps back in that failure and you sat in that failure and you're like, this sucks and this isn't what I wanted or what I hoped for, but I still have this huge goal no matter what, and I'm still going to keep taking one step at a time, through the mud to get there, and then you're there.
Yeah.
And then you look up and you're like, wow, I'm there. That's it. The end.
We're there together.
So, Natalie, thank you. I'm so glad. Hopefully this encouraged somebody today and you felt like you got something out of this and I didn't overshare. So apologies if I did. I don't know I don't really understand what that means. So I'm not really good at like determining when the line of oversharing is.
Yes.
So I hope that this was encouraging for you and that you took something away from this. And, I really do think that failure is required. I don't think it's optional. I think it's a required part of success. And a lot of people recognize that are highly successful people recognize that failure is not optional. It is a part of success, and they use failure as a growth tool to measure. And I'm actually reading a book, The Gap and the Gain. It's a really good book. And it's about seeing yourself in the gain instead of the gap. This is the last thing I want to say. I love this book because it's all about perspective and how you view your situation. He talks about measuring backwards. So for us, we are measuring backwards. We are looking at where we are now compared to where we were last year. And we're light years ahead of last year. We paid off all of our tax burden. We paid off all these things. We took over operations of the NNBA, and we talked about on the way to Chattanooga the other day. We went through 90 days. 90 days, 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, and 10 years. And we looked back and we each said 3 things that we gained, wins, 3 wins from each of those time periods over the last 10 years of all these wins that we've had. And it was awesome. It was really amazing, like what we've accomplished together and like how far we've come. And instead of like, we could have spent that whole trip like talking about how like things arenn't good enough and I'm not happy with this and I wish you would do this and the business isn't doing this and we're not seeing this and I don't have what I need and like there are those things that we could have spent that time on.
But you have to start in the present because we tried to start 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's too hard.
What
happened 10 years? Who were we married 10 years ago? Who were we 10 years ago?
Yeah.
But I think like the gap and the gain has really reminded me that staying in that positive mindset is so important for growth. Like you cannot just sit there and think about how this is not working or it just will keep not working.
Yeah.
So I think it's really, really important to measure backwards, look back at how far you've come, look back at the wins that you've had, look back at all these things. And then where do you want to be in a year? Use those things to where you want to be in 3 years and 10 years. Like we talked about how we want to have multiple houses, and we talked about, how we want to help people and how we want to grow and things we want to do. And, I think it's really important to focus on that. One of the quotes in my slide deck from the NNBA presentation I went back and looked on today was, everything you want is on the other side of fear. And it's like, you have to be able to work through that. You have to be able to like overcome that gap in order to move forward.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's it.
The end. Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us today. We love your comments and just, hearing if this was helpful, hearing your stories of overcoming your failures. I really love hearing that. I love talking to nurses and other entrepreneurs that, have been through failures and come out on the other side. It's always uplifting. It's always exciting to hearing about your successes. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you next Tuesday.
Bye.